going on, everybody? It's Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent. We have with us a very, very, very special guest, the CHO, Chief Heady Officer of Heady Wax Fiends, the community, and the founder of the Heady Wax Fiends Record Club. We'll get into what all of that is in a little bit. Kris Howland, thank you so much for being with us, Kris. Welcome to Secondhand Talent.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I appreciate your time. Looking forward to
Well,
chatting about all things today.
all things secondhand and all things heady, and
Yeah,
sometimes they go hand in hand. So, first question for you. It's the first question. We ask this to every interviewee. Had you never heard the term before? So, before I mentioned it for the first time to you, had you never heard the term? Somebody says to you, secondhand talent. What does that mean to you? What comes into your mind when you hear
well,
the
I'm probably gonna figure out the Chicago angle first, right?
ah, ah.
Um, but then I was thinking about this quite a bit um, earlier today, and to me, it like conjures up the the crew behind the scenes kind of angle to this industry. I would guess, yeah. Um, the people without faces, the ones who really make the magic happen but nobody knows about. That would be my stab in the dark.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much nail on the head. It's those unsung heroes, when, we put on a live production or when we're involved in a live production, it's not just us, it's not just the band, it's a lot of people that are involved, and from owning the venue to running the stage to running the audio to the lights and everything in between. It really truly does take a village to put on a live music event. It takes, like I like to say, about the population of Wyoming to put on something like Lollapalooza,
Yeah.
and and those folks deserve to be recognized for what they do. So it's that talent that's there. It's the same level as who's on the stage. It's just often overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I watched this Netflix documentary recently about roadies, right? Or crew members now. And they talked about how like some of those guitar techs were way better guitar players than the people that they worked for.
Well, for some of our listeners, well, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Two notes on that. So way back when, season one, episode two, we interviewed our friend Mike Leighton, who's a luthier,
Oh, cool.
and his fascinating aspect of secondhand talent. Right, people don't typically think who makes the instrument. Um, his motivation for becoming a luthier is that he's a guitar player, sure, but he wanted to shred and wasn't quite there and said, "Screw it, I'm gonna make the instrument that the people who I wanna shred are gonna shred on."
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, facilitating and being that process, and, like, we love driving home that point that, you don't need to be a musician to be involved in live music.
Yeah, total 100%. Case
Like,
in
there's
point.
exact case in point, on both
Yeah.
sides. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
here
Yeah, I mean, I can't play anything but an iPod, so
I mean, that I'm in the same boat, but both of us have a deep passion for live music, for music in general. And before we get started talking about Heady Wax Fiends, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what your roots are, where you came from musically, and kind of how you got yourself to where you are today in the position of well, let's separate it out. Let's start with, your roots in music, and then let's talk about getting into vinyl.
cool. Yeah, I mean, I was a '80s baby raised by two music freaks. So in our generation, there was a turntable in the house when I was little. There's an eight-track player in one car. There's a cassette player in another. They moved on to CD collection. My first college computer had a CD burner and a cat, high speed internet connection and Napster beta. So I've kind of I've kind of bridged all those technologies, if you will, to listen. But music was so integral in my childhood. I didn't know like talk radio was a thing until I got to college, you know. And
Hmm.
my parents grew up in stricter kind of households where their parents had a lot of input and ideas about music that they were listening to. So
Hmm.
my parents, my entire life, their whole thing was like, we're never going to tell you what you're listening to isn't as good as what we grew up on, or that you can't listen to something. So like, I would have sleepovers and we'd be listening to Doggy Style, or
Huh.
even like in utero, right? There was some
Right.
lines that like some of my more conservative friends weren't allowed to listen to, like rape me, at like in their homes. Really big on like those big 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s bands. My dad was a Floyd dude through and through. So
Hmm.
he would go see multiple shows on the same tour. And yeah, his favorite pastime was eating LSD and going to Pink Floyd concerts. And
It's a
and
good
the,
hobby.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like chip off the old block, I guess there. But my mom liked all the classic rock stuff, like a lot of parents of my generation. But my mom instilled into me that kind of this new age thing that's stuck with me since. I would say like the Cars self-titled album was probably my mom's favorite album of all time.
Hmm.
It's still massive to me to today. Or
Sure. Great
kind
album.
of kind of fed my hunger for my fandom of Talking Heads. Yeah, so I tried to play band. Tried to sing in choir. It just didn't really work for me. Um, I was a little late for the Grateful Dead, right? So, but we all the older brothers were Deadheads, and they would go to Buckeye Lake, or they would go to Alpine Valley. I grew up in Northwest Ohio. I guess I should back up a little bit there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, a little context, sure.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
Midwest born and bred, like kind of Pine Knot Blossom, Deer Creek, Polaris. Those are like my coming of age grounds. And I really got kind of my own musical identity the first time I listened to a live one, Fish a live one, like after
Hmm.
school, smoking Beasters in my buddy Caleb's garage. I joke
Kids
all the
these
time.
days, kids these days don't know about
No,
beasters.
no clue, man. And they
No.
were a bitch to get too. But
Mm-hmm.
I tell people all the time, and it's in jest, but it's only so much of a joke that the most expensive like hour and a half of my life is the first time I listened to a live one, um, because
Mm.
it's a catalyst of a lot of things that
Sure.
make sense. Yeah, and then
Mm.
my first Fish show was 7/31/98 Polaris. And I saw decent number of shows before the first hiatus. I didn't do a lot in 2.0. And then in 2003, 2004, I moved out west. And I was in Wyoming for a little bit, and I was really into uh the String Cheese Incident live recordings.
Mm.
I traded a lot of live shows, and I was getting stuff from like Telluride and stuff like that as like a filler to a show that didn't quite take up 3 discs or whatever. And then the next big bang moment for me was my first Stream Cheese show was in 2005. It was the Big Summer Classic. Uh,
Okay. Sure. Sure.
this roving festival of bands, and the Yonder Mountain String Band played right before Stream Cheese Incident that night. And dude, that's all she wrote for me, really. I mean, there's like this
That'll do it.
massive girlfriend is better cover. Yeah. So I mean, you know,
You
that
know,
kind of gets us to present day, I guess, in a one
not
sheet, if you will.
not a day goes by I don't miss Jeff.
Same, same.
Yeah, I had the wonderful opportunity to hang out with him a few times, and he's just one of the greatest dudes, and
Yeah.
made some incredible music and played some incredible music. And that energy that he brought to the stage, that frenetic energy is something that some show memories that'll be forever in my head.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely.
and
Agree more.
you'd mentioned a lot of different media. We joke that kids these days don't know about beasters, but a lot of kids these days don't know about, you know, downloaded from Napster and LimeWire and Kazaa and burning
Yeah,
CDs and the importance of having a CDRW and cassettes before that and overdubbing and the tragedy of recording over something accidentally and
yeah,
so many we've gone through in our time, short time here on this earth, there's such an incredible explosion and transition of forms of media for it to be translated into our lives.
yeah,
But vinyl records uniquely have sustained those traditions that test those transitions, rather, and that test of time. It's unique in that. There are still CD and cassette aficionados. I'm sure there are 8-track aficionados as well. But vinyl seems to me, unique in the sense that it's immortalized not only in its medium, but also in, the brick and mortar presence. And I'm curious as to, how you became a vinyl aficionado and how that bled into the impetus for starting the Heady Wax Fiends group.
yeah. I mean, like my really good friend Ryan Kirkland, he collected vinyl, like when we first met, and it was like the antithesis of what I wanted to do because I had a box like this big that had more music on it that you could fit an entire house on vinyl.
Oh.
And I was shopping for his birthday one day, and it became this thing where I would buy him records for like gifts, right? Like I hunted him down a John Hartford aeroplane for him one year, and then I got him Name of the Band's Talking Heads one year, and I was in one of our local shops, Black and Red. It's north of Denver. It's a suburb shop, but it's been around since like the late '70s. And I found a copy of Remain Light, right, Talking Heads.
Great
So
album.
I bought that, and I bought like Honky Tonk Chateau by Elton John, and maybe like some Peter Green, Fleetwood Mac. And I was planning on giving him all those records, and then I got home and like I kept Remaining Light, and then um, I I kind of fell into it backwards. I kind of started messing around with some like craft projects with vinyl. I was looking for a way to kind of repurpose the vinyl that gets thrown out of thrift stores, and I answered a Craigslist ad for a collection, and I was honestly gonna make a bunch of bowls and shit, man. Like out of these albums that I figured couldn't be played from this older collector, and it was the buy of a lifetime. It's like that first hit. I'm still
Sure.
chasing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it was like 350 records, a lot of classic rock discographies,
Wow.
60 bucks. So I got home and I
Yep.
started, yeah, right, and
Little
like
dabble, do ya? Yeah.
a lot of it's still in this room to this day. But
Wow.
I started looking through it back in my apartment, and then like I went and grabbed a Audio Technica LP60, and I RCA cabled it into an old iPod Bose sound dock. I listened like that for a while, and then it just evolved, right? I mean, I started discovering how many of my contemporary artists were producing vinyl. I'd say like my first year or two, I probably didn't buy anything that wasn't 25 to
That like
50.
established or pre-existing, like no.
Well, because, I mean, in my 30s, somebody was like, here's everything that's ever existed,
Right.
it
Right.
wherever you're at for 10 bucks a month. And between that and my digital collection, I was like, I thought I was set on the present and the future, if you will. So that was kind of a natural progression.
So- Hey folks, Steiner here. Today's episode is brought to you by Sweet Buds. As you can see on the hat right there, Sweet Buzz is an Illinois local and bull brand brought to you by the independent social equity craft grower Cisco Farms. Sweet Buzz was born out of deep friendship and a shared sweet tooth between the founders. Generational confectionery experience goes into all of the handcrafted fast-acting edibles, and you can take my word on that. The Sweet Buzz edible line includes Sweet Sparks, which I've got right here. Sweet Sparks are coated chocolatey candies with 1 milligram of THC per piece. It's the ultimate for flexibility and microdosing. They also have the Sweet Something cups, 10 milligram cups, and peanut butter, mint chill, caramel met cookie, and my personal favorite, cookie got creamed. Finally, there is the Sweet M Powder, which is a 10 milligram sachet of lightly sweetened powder that can be used just about anywhere. Sweet Buzz can be found in over 100 dispensaries across the state of Illinois, and they're coming into more each and every day. Follow them online at Get Sweet Buzz on Instagram and TikTok, and check them out at getsweetbuzz.com. Thanks again, and back to the interview. So you had mentioned, you felt kind of set up with your music collection, and now hell of a haul,
Yeah.
hell,
Yeah.
hell of a haul, and it's wild. Also, it was also wild to hear you say that a lot of that collection is still with you. You had also mentioned that it made you curious to see, which some of the contemporary artists, you followed, were producing vinyl. I'm curious to know first, what some of those contemporary who some of those contemporary artists were, and then what you found.
Yeah. So at the time I was listening to a lot of kind of neo soul, neo funk bands. Orgone was a big band at that time period in my life. Sharon Jones, rest in peace. So I kind of organically found like Coal Mine record label.
Shout out Coal Mine.
Yeah, full circles. And that's kind of where I started. And then um, I ended up I ended up collecting all the Yonder Mountain String Band studio albums pretty quickly. And then my first record store day was Fish Hoist. That's what I was there
Mm.
for. So that's where I was at. And that dates me a little bit.
And hey, I was in that same record store day line, so
Yeah,
don't
yeah. It
yeah,
was miserable in Denver. I remember that. So that's kind of where I figured out that there was a lot of stuff being made that was could be impressive vinyl still, and that's
'cause
kind of when I it blew my mind open that there was this big kind of Renaissance boom happening.
yeah, and just to kind of to touch on, how I came to love vinyl a little bit. It did start kind of in a similar way to yours with what had existed. My early exposure to music. My dad's a big Bee Gees fan, and he took me to see all those concerts in the park. But it was bands like Bachman Turner Overdrive and Rare Earth and Three Dog Night, Grand
Yeah,
Funk Railroad, and that was my early exposure to live music growing up. On my mom's side, she was a big Deadhead, and had a bunch of tapes and, had an original copy of American Beauty and,
nice.
a bunch of old Zappa records, and that was the first vinyl I really handled were those original Grateful Dead records, those original Zappa records, some of which, she gracefully, put into my hands, over the years, and, it's been something that I have a personal connection with her about, that's something that's been between us, when I was growing up. And when I was became, a more aware teenager and, learned more about my uncle's career in music, um, he gave me a copy of his band's album. The Lonely Moans album was one of the first records I ever had, and I just remember feeling like, how cool it was to like, my mom's brother, my Uncle Sam, was the drummer on this record and wrote these songs and sang, and, like, it like so many people have. Oh my god, this is wild. Um, and I kinda started building out my collection with some of those older records from my mom and with, records that my uncle was on. Um, and, when I did start listening to bands like Fish in particular, you know, I remember, very vividly, waiting in the merch line at Northerly Island to get my copy of A Picture of Nectar, when they did the repress of that, and they were releasing it only, on lot, at Northerly Island. That was, I mean, I have incredibly fond memories, tied to it. But, similar to you, I didn't really realize that there was such a wider group of people that shared that affinity and had that same deep connection. And I was living overseas, and I discovered the Facebook group Heady Wax Fiends. I was like, "Oh, this seems pretty cool." A friend of mine invited me to the group, and um, we'll talk more about it in a little bit. But it's just one of the coolest, kindest communities out there because it's just about the love of vinyl and the love of music. And I've always wanted to ask you since joining the group, you know, what were the steps that led you um to making this group and, creating this community? Was it done just by yourself? I'm not 100% clear on the full history of it, and I'd love to hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I had the Jeff Austin suicide affected me greatly. Having conversation with mutual friends at that success level, or maybe a little higher, about how much they paid attention to the things that were said in social media. So prior to the pandemic, so you're probably mid 2019, like I left social media. Um, and then coming off kind of the tail end of the pandemic, I needed an outlet to talk to people because I wasn't on tour anymore. I wasn't hosting listening parties and stuff like that. So I pre-pandemic I'd helped run another vinyl group. And I came back and I jumped back into that one and I was in that one till I wasn't. and I was uh I was talking to some friends and I said, I think I'm going to give kind of my own group a go. And I was on the toilet and the name kind of came to me. And the name in the group and everything about it is kind of a retaliation to your typical community that you find around obsessive collecting or obsessive music fans. So to not rewind too far, but I had never felt completely at home in any of the fan bases that I kind of belonged to. Like I didn't see Fish early enough, or I didn't see Yonder early enough. And then when I joined like our vinyl when I started collecting, and those people ate me alive with my little LP60, RCA'd through like
It's about the tech, yeah, it's
yeah.
about yeah.
So I had some buddies. So my buddy Brandon Liss, we'd been really good friends locally for a long time, and I actually like made him take some of the records I didn't keep from that haul. I asked him if he wanted to help me out. Josiah Miller, I knew from Billy Stream's tour. We just hit it off because we could talk about music without intimidating each other. I sniped JT Jackson from the group, the other group that remains nameless. Um, and then so Blake Borshader, he had been a huge supporter of my vinyl habit for a long time. Is and he didn't want to get tied down by a big vinyl collection. I became like his Ryan Kirkland, where he would go shopping and send me gifts.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So I brought Blake in as an admin before Blake really collected. And it started as like 3 degrees of separation from me, right? So it was my friends and their friends and their friends. Um, and now it's like 7,500 people. So it's kind of crazy. Um, but yeah, we
And
exist.
I mean, I just sorry
Yeah,
to cut you off, but just like so all of the people you mentioned, Blake, of course, friend of the program, interviewed
yeah,
earlier in the season, owner of the Get Down in Portland. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, or even if you're not, go check it out. It's an incredible place to go see music. Um, just before taping, at the time, a phrase I love to use at the time of this recording, there was a concert at the Get Down, by the band
yeah.
Polyrhythmics,
Was.
and, you talk about this massive community, and like I said before, it's a community that I've personally watched, have been involved in, have met incredible people, friends of the show like Garrett Melby, John Heinz, really incredible people. Um, and it's all about just the love of music. And you touched on something a couple of times, and I briefly referenced it at the beginning. I'm going to bring it back full circle as we now talk about the record club. Um, One of the reasons that I mean, it's all well and good to have a community. I mean, the fact that it's managed so effectively by the estimable people who you mentioned before, who are all, I mean, my interactions with all of them, they're nothing but just wonderful people. And I'm, you know, very, very happy that I came across this community, and I've had the fortune and to have conversations with them and meet them and yourself, and it's just been all love all around. Uh, how does it fit into secondhand talent in my mind is something that I think some who are regulars of the program may be wondering. And like I said, you touched on newer bands. Who do you like now that's producing wax? And, other friend of the program, Tip of the Hat, Munyon, they have pressed their first 2 albums to vinyl, to which I was overjoyed that I could add to my collection. This record club, one of the things that it does is that it gives this unique platform to this amazing audience, to up and coming bands and bands that otherwise might not have that exposure. And to me, that's something, it's an invaluable service to live music, in my opinion, because it helps facilitate, you know, in the same similar to the spirit of secondhand talent, not just who these people are, but that there are so many other bands in those spheres to take notice of and to listen to music similar to that. And I'm curious along these lines, I kind of have an idea because like I said, I've watched it progress, but where did the notion for a record club or an I an exclusive release series, how did that begin or gestate? When along the process did that become a thing?
So it was really early 2022. David Johnson, shout out, had asked the group, what record club should I join? And as
Hmm.
I'm known to do in good humor, I said, send me $40 a month, I'll ship you a record. And
Ah,
the response was out of control. So at that point, and I'd already had a decent relationship with Eric Myers, who's now like my principal partner in the record club. And he had already an established online record shop, Ridge Runner Records, and
shout out Ridge Runner.
yeah, and I mean they were integral to the Heady Wax tunes for a long time.
Links in the description to Ridge Runner Records. True, support your local independent record shops. It's really
Yeah,
important.
so I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, do you think that like you could handle the back end of this thing, this fulfillment?" Um, and we all talked about it for a while, and we're like, I mean, let's give it a shot and see how long we can like keep it up. So
Mhm.
these conversations are being had like during the Super Bowl, to put it in perspective, like early January 2022. Um, we found a we found a coal mine artist, the Karma Chief, which is a subsidiary, I guess, of coal mine, Kendra Morris. And we literally reached out to distribution and said, "Hey, can we get 100 copies?" And they said, "Sure." So then there was a backlog of people that still wanted in, so we opened it back up and it shot up into like the low 200s. So we reached back out to distribution and said, "Hey, can we get 225?" And they said, "Sure." Well, then we had to figure out like why people would pay us more money for this record than they could buy it from any number of retailers or label direct. So Kendra Morris, the sweetheart that she is, the OG Heady Wax Fiends darling, agreed to sign a bunch of insert cards for us. And then one of Eric's local friends, Bobby Rosenstock, of Just a Jar Press, we reached out to him to design an OBI strip, right? A kind of an identifier, uh, borrowed from the Japanese releases, where it kind of came out of American releases being released in Japan so that people could understand what they couldn't read. So like, okay, that's a start. And then we did that for 3 releases. I mean, we basically just we were just winging it along. And then that first year was 6 releases. And so for our fourth and fifth, those deals were happening at the same time. And those were our first like exclusive color variants of an album. And man, we haven't looked back. I mean, since that point, everything that we've done has been either completely exclusive to the membership or an exclusive, um, like art print with that Goose EP that we did, or an exclusive color.
And I mean, I have the like I mentioned, I was in very early, close to the beginning, and I have the distinct pleasure of looking over and having an almost full record shelf now
Yeah,
of Heady Wax Fiends records,
yeah, it's almost a cube,
and
man. It's almost a calyx cube now. Yeah,
it's really, um, you know, I mean, impressive is the easy word to go to. For me, when I consider, and we spoke a little bit about this before the interview, when I consider some of the artists that you've worked with, Kitchen Dwellers, I think one of the hottest up and coming bluegrass bands, around, to get their albums out there, and especially to get out albums that people were really upcharging for, and
hmm,
to be able to get them into the hands of a community that cares about the music that's on it more than what the record is worth. And to bring back, Drive by Bela Fleck, a legend in
yeah,
in the bluegrass scene, and someone, one of the big themes of the program is, passing down our love of what we do to the next generation. And I think it's so important, not just to put on, newer bands, which do such a great job of, but bringing back, classics like that, deserve to be in rotation, and that we're making these same people aware of. And most importantly, like I somewhat hinted at before, getting this music, I think part of the appeal, you mentioned, they pay why would they pay more to me for the record than than why would they pay more to me for the record than getting it at the shop? And the OBI is incredible. And Kendra, absolutely. Shout out Kendra. I mean,
yeah,
signing those cards, and for to get this kick started, and all the things that so many bands have contributed, and artists like my dear friend Jack Firestone, shout out buddy, who made an amazing print that we used for the club, that I have hanging, and I know you do too. um I love how it's brought in all of these people and have given them this avenue and exposure to this group of people that truly love the music.
yeah.
um
I think it was very important to me to involve as many of my friends as I could, and while I figured out if this was going to work or not. And a lot of those are visual artists, like lot art and fan art kind of guys. And it's one of the reasons we made that move to the unstuck hype sticker versus the OBI. Now I get to feature members on the write-ups and members on the artwork, and I've always said that an LP is kind of like it's art inside of art, right? Because the
Mm.
jacket itself is
Layers, yeah, layers of art, 100%.
we kind of found, or I found my own art to put on this already multi-layered expression of art. So um that would be one of my proudest things is um like my buddy Scott Chase. I've known him for decades, from early yonder fantasy tour days, right? And he's from Lexington, Kentucky, and Rounder 0044, JD Crow in the New South is a very important record to him. And it's a very important record to me. And I kind of I kind of felt like my voice was getting a little overexposed. I've been being the one to make the announcements and writing up some of these hypes and stuff. So he was the first one where I was like, hey, dude, it's nobody else. Like, and he knocked it out of the park. And to think that there's like eventually 1,000 copies of that are going to be out there with um Matt Crocher, our mutual friends, artwork.
Yeah, shout out, Matt. Love you,
And
buddy.
it kills for the album art too. I mean, it's just perfect. So to just kind of catch that momentum, the OBIs were great. They got to be a little redundant, and they were very labor intensive, because
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
back of this, I mean, I have to stress enough, like I get to do a lot of the fun parts of running a record club, and Eric Myers is the one in behind the scenes packing every record in every box, and that fell on him, and it streamlined the process. But the big key is just um,
the
kind of like
personal touch.
exactly, even to the point of like with the pressing colors, I probably stay awake too much, like try and come up with names that kind of correlate. I don't know like what I call those, like sometimes
Yeah, oh,
it
yeah.
could be a little corny, but I've been leaning on some of the friends for those too. Like, Dylan came up with that side panel swirl for Bill Fleck Drive. While
Yeah,
we
it's
were just rapping about it one day, man. I was like, that one's done. Like
if you
next.
ever if you ever wanna have a fun time, go on Discogs, look up, Munion's pressings of their albums. The variations and the color names that people come up with are
Yeah.
insane, and I think that that's such an important such an important element of it is that, started by Kendra, the personal touch and really putting the care into it. I think everybody who's in the record club, myself included, understands that this is a labor of love. Like this is not something done without love, but it's not something done without labor. And there's a lot of people working behind the scenes to facilitate this. And that's really truly, in the spirit of this show is to acknowledge them and to you know, let them know that, like, we see you for what you do. And you mentioned one other thing that I want to touch on about being the face of things and that I'm not a natural born podcast host. This was a steep learning curve for me to having my face on screen and talking. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for all the feedback that I've gotten, and it's been a wonderful journey. But it was absolutely a learning curve for me. I do, understand it, and I've felt it before, and I just, I would kinda like to ask, um, with all that in mind, what the impetus was for coming on the program.
Um, you know, the thing is, man, is this whole community is about supporting each other within. Um, it's the artist music group on Facebook. It's the industry music group on Facebook. Even to the fact, a lot of the leads that I've gotten are from people I didn't know were in the group, and they manage acts, or they have an in there. And it felt like it was probably time to start talking about some of the things now that we have so many people that weren't there from the double or triple digits, even membership like yourself, to kind of speak about what the mindset was. They know the values and they know the core, but in the same way that I want to bring on the homies in my venture, it felt important to support what you're doing.
I think that's another element of it when it comes to the collective group supporting the record club and keeping it such an active and positive community is that the hard work, to me, that's where the hard work that you guys put in is reflected in that
I appreciate that. Yeah,
in
I
the,
do. That means a lot to me.
from a member of the record club, right, from a member of the group, and not on the admin team, and seeing what it is behind the scenes. For me, Heady Wax Fiends is my place of refuge, like, on social media. I haven't posted a lot recently, been very busy with secondhand talent stuff and getting my haircut, people, which you might not have noticed, but it's one of the very few places on the internet that's truly, when I go there, I know what I'm getting.
Yeah, and
And
it's the same for me, man. I mean, I hope people understand that. Like, at the end of the day, like, I'm just another fiend, man. Looking for a place to talk about things without judgment and to facilitate conversations about music. I tell people all the time, like, you don't have to collect vinyl to be a really engaged member of the group. Like, if
absolutely.
you're gonna find stuff that you're in love with that you didn't know existed. If you come in and you just drop your guard, don't be a dick, don't shit on anybody's appreciation, you know. Um,
Be a decent person and just
that's it.
like, and
That's
that's
it.
the and one of the I gotta say, before we go, one of the things I appreciate the most about the group is, and some might think it's excessive, but the rule that we don't shit on other people's music taste.
Yeah,
I think that the enf not just having the rule, but and not just even really the enforcement of the rule, but the acknowledgement of it and the respect for it that the members of the group have. Shout out to every single member of the group
yeah.
for really, like, understanding that it is the place to be, to talk about records, to talk about music, to share what you're listening to bring stuff up and just have some cool dialogue with cool people from around the country, around the world, and not have to worry about it. It's awesome.
And it self governs now. To be completely honest with you, there's zero tolerance on things, and that's where I have to kind of step in, right? Or other
Yeah.
members of the admin team when they have the time, but for the most part, I mean, 95% of it is taken care of we take care of our own in there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just the rallying point. And I mean, that's so impressive to me that we've been able to pull this off with the growth, and it's because of all of you guys. I mean, I just had an idea, right? And it was rocky for a while, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it works because of who's in there. That's the
And you know, I have that exact same sentiment about secondhand talent. It was an idea, wasn't sure if it would work, but it's about folks like yourself who have taken their time to come and be on the show and have these conversations that have really propelled this forward and made it, worthwhile. Not just worthwhile, but something that I love to do and will keep on doing. Kris, thank you so much for being on the show. Our chief Heady officer from Heady Wax Fiends.
yes.
This is Thank you for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, man. Keep doing what you do, and we'll keep doing what we do, and we'll see each other soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Folks, don't touch that dial. Next Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. Central. We'll be back with another episode. Have a great week. And that's a podcast.
Awesome, dude. Thanks.